Well, good morning and welcome as we celebrate a life well lived and a friend who will be greatly missed. I guess I should have looked at the list to see what's supposed to happen next, but after that wonderful welcome, I guess the obituary is next. And one of the grandsons is going to read that. All right.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Christopher Young. I am Jim's grandson on Anne's side. I'm going to be reading his obituary today. And I don't have his beautiful baritone voice, so just picture that and then it'll be so much better. Okay. Jimmy Walton Ritchie, an imperfect Christian, grateful for the grace of Jesus Christ, left this world on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. Born in Brookhaven, Mississippi, to Walton Weathersby Ritchie and Bobby Wooten Ritchie, who preceded him to heaven, he graduated from Natchez High School and, with the aid of much prayer and assistance from sympathetic professors, received his bachelor's degree from the University of Mississippi. While at the university, he was a member of Sigma Nu fraternity, whose qualifications for membership were fortunately not as high as they currently are. After graduating from Ole Miss, he served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army Artillery for 2 years, during which time he was blessed to marry the former Perry Thickens from Laurel, Mississippi, to whom he remained wedded until his death. He was employed by International Business Machines in data processing sales for 15 years, after which he formed and ran his own consulting and software firm for 20 years until his retirement. During this time, he wrote 2 successful books, recorded audio tapes, and a CD for national distribution, and was a frequent speaker at storytelling festivals and other events. He leaves the aforementioned beloved wife, Helen Perry T. Ritchie, 2 children, Dr. James V. Ritchie, married to Martha Hester, and Dr. Ann P. Young, married to Alan Young. His foster son, Richard Lindsay, and 12 grandchildren, all of whom were the source of incredible pleasure to him. At the memorial service, the body is present in ashes form, since his instructions were to take the usable parts for distribution to wherever they might be and burn the rest up. Anyone whose sensibilities might be bruised by this obituary is urged to take it up with the deceased who wrote it when we have the occasion to meet on the other side. Thank you.
That sounded suspiciously like Jim Ritchie wrote that himself. One of the things that I have become more aware of as time has passed is the importance of finishing well. Lots of people do well in life and then mess up before the end. But Jim finished well. And I guess we can, well, it's just a good example. The aforementioned son-in-law, Alan, would you come lead us in a couple of great old hymns?
Yes, sir. So we're going to start off with Amazing Grace, hymn number 343. We actually were gathered around Jim's bed when we thought he was non-verbal, and we're singing this song, the grandkids, and he joined in. So we wanted to share this again today. So yeah, if you join us on hymn 343, Amazing Grace.
Amazing grace.
has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be, as long as life endures. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amen. And we're going to share one more, hymn number 635, In the Garden. I come to the garden alone, while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear falling on my ear, the Son of God discloses. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet, the birds hush their singing, and the melody that he gave to me within my heart is ringing. And he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. I'd stay in the garden with him, though the night around me be falling, but he bids me go through the voice of woe. His voice to me is calling, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me I am his own. And the voice we share as we tarry
Please be seated. Dr. Jim, I believe you're up.
Hi, my name is Josh, and Granddaddy is my dad's dad. Psalm 91, excuse me. Psalm 91 is one of his favorite passages. So, theoretically, I'm going to read it to you. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. And that's Psalm 91. Would you mind finishing out for me? Thank you.
Jim left a big hole in the lives of his grandchildren. The one who lives under the protection of the Most High dwells in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. He himself will deliver you from the hunter's nest, from the destructive plague. He will cover you with his feathers, and you will take refuge under his wings. His faithfulness will be a protective shield. You will not fear the terror of the night, the arrow that flies at the day, the plague that stalks in the darkness, or the pestilence that ravages at noon. Though 1,000 fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, the pestilence will not reach you. You will only see it with your eyes and witness the punishment of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord, my refuge, the Most High, your dwelling place, no harm will come to you, no plague will come near your tent, for he will give his angels orders concerning you to protect you in all of your ways. They will support you with their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and on the cobra. You will trample the young lion and the serpent. Because he is lovingly devoted to me, I will deliver him. I will exalt him because he knows my name. When he calls out to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him. I will give him honor. I will satisfy him with a long life and show him my love. And Jim had a long life, and none of those plagues or terrors that were mentioned affected him. God blessed, and he walked before God faithfully. Dr. Jim?
Well, it is so good to see all of y'all here today. And of course, we're all sorry for the circumstances, but I'm really grateful. And we're grateful that you chose to come out. We know Christmas time is not when you want to go to a memorial service, really. So we very much appreciate that y'all came out and to give honor to Dad. So thanks very much, and appreciate Pastor Sam Hughes and Kathy Osborne and all of who've been involved in being able to put this together in such short notice, but we really are grateful for how nicely things are going here. So it's great to be able to meet with y'all. It will surprise none of you that Dad wrote most of his own eulogy. Because he did love to write, and he loved a story, and he had a story, didn't he? So there it is. And I'll also say that he just insisted on us, I don't want no weepy memorial. We want to have, it'll be a time of grieving, but it's just like Paul said to the Thessalonians, we do not grieve as those who have no hope. So he had a very strong hope, and he was ready to go. But one of the things that he provided for his eulogy is this list of things I have done as of the year 2024. There are 6 pages of things I have done. And so I've taken the liberty of trimming some of that down, but the whole thing is available for you to peruse downstairs should you be interested. I commend it for your perusal because there's a lot of fun stuff in here. So I'm going to read through some of these and with a few interjections from the family in the midst of it, if that's all right, because that's what he wanted. Things I have done: trained my own bird dogs and retrievers, flown my own airplane, gutted deer, learned to play the harmonica, waited tables in college, but put myself through college mainly by playing poker. We've heard the word of integrity with Dad so far. He was who he was, and that was all right. Sold computers with IBM when most folks didn't know what they were, and was a member of the best sales force in the world with IBM. Made the Golden Circle, which is like top performers when he did that. Raised 3 youngins, stayed married to the same incredible woman for 63 years. Let me find my thing here. Mom, what she wanted interjected into this is, the Lord God tells us he calls us by name before he created the world. Mom said, I saw Jim Ritchie the first time, and though I did not know him, the Holy Spirit told me I was going to marry him, and we've had 63 blessed years learning to love. Yes, indeed. Back to the list. I'm a born-again Christian. I developed a taste for good scotch. Little juxtaposition there, maybe. Plowed behind a mule, won a letter in high school football, built miles of barbed wire fence, and I accompanied him on a few of those miles. Built my own barn and cattle catch pen, taught children and adults in Sunday school, commanded an artillery firing battery in the Army, learned how to call ducks, ran my own business for 20 years, survived an IRS audit, acted in plays and played a speaking part in a blockbuster movie, played a speaking part in a not-so-blockbuster movie, wrote 2 successful books. Now, books. His books are wonderful, and here's something that we, both Dad and the family, would be delighted if you took a bit of Dad's legacy home with you. We have piles of those books downstairs, and we really would love it if you took as many of those with you. Take cases with you if you want. Really, I mean, it's Christmas time. They make great gifts. Keep them on hand for house guests, or when you get invited to go somewhere and you think, we forgot to get a present. There you go. You got a case of his books right there. I do recommend that you screen them ahead of time because they are not for all audiences. But truly, truly, we would love it if you took a whole lot of those with you. We have some strapping young fellows down here who will help you take as many cases as you want to your car. Enough about that. Back to the list. Bounced my 11 grandchildren on my knee, not all at once. Drawn water from a well, used a country outhouse, milked cows when I was a boy, sung at weddings, worked in a tire factory. I'm not reading that one. You can read that one downstairs. Stared bankruptcy in its craggy face. Quit smoking cigarettes, then quit smoking a pipe. Owned a bunch of land, sold a bunch of land. Known a lot of high-placed politicians. Hunted ducks in the icy water wearing leaky waders. Elected the vice president of my college fraternity. I've been a groom, best man, usher, and father of the bride at weddings. Alan, a brother-in-law who's been leading up here singing, and by the way, who made this beautiful urn that Dad's ashes are in down here. I invite you to come have a look at that. It is a work of art. Alan said, my dad died 23 years ago, and my stepfather died 4 months later, and Jim has been my dad for all of this time. And also, Martha, my wife, said, I always knew that he loved me, and he was always glad to see me, and he was crazy about his grandchildren. He baited many a hook and untangled many a line, and he was a father for me too after my father died 35 years ago. We keep running into lots of people who say he acted as my father, so we appreciate that with Dad. Back to the list. Written newspaper columns. Been snorkeling in Key West and Cozumel. served as a member and president of a county library board, recorded 4 successful audio tapes, read by the light of kerosene lamps, shot pool for money. Remember when the first thing you heard when you picked up the telephone receiver was, "Number, please"? How many people was it? Oh, yeah, right. Swam in the Mississippi River. Been sprayed by a skunk. Yeah, ooh. Was president of a Rotary Club, was president of a school board, was a member of a county economic development board, elected president of my high school student body, sang in a church choir, lost most of my hair, was a member of a church vestry, wrote magazine articles, wrote newspaper articles, hosted radio shows, been interviewed on TV and radio, caught several bass, plenty large enough to be mounted, got a lot of friends, and no enemies that I know of. Isn't that something to be able to say, you know? Rode my share of crazy horses, got my nose broken in a fight. I did a terrible thing to Dad one time, probably more than once, but one in particular. 9/11 had happened, and I was in the Navy at that point. I'm an ER doc, and I was in the Navy. And the Navy provides medical support for the Marine Corps, and the Marines were going to war. So our group, we had a number of us who were assigned to go do that if we were called. And I was in a position to be responsible to choose who was going to go. The Monday before Thanksgiving, we got word that they needed 2 ER docs to go with the Marines. And our daughter Meredith, the 5th kiddo, had just been born not 2 months before. So it was my decision to decide who was going to go. And so I spoke with a bunch of colleagues around work. You know, how do we do this? I haven't really done this before. And the colleagues' uniform advice was, "You're a commander, send the younger guys. It's for them to go and do. You should do that." And, you know, it just didn't feel right. So that's when I did the horrible thing. And I called Dad because I needed good advice. I said, "Dad, what should I do?" And he said, "You're asking me? Oh, man." And there was a long pause, and he said, "I can't believe that I'm telling you this, but if it was me and I sent somebody else and something happened to them, I'm just not really sure I could look at myself in the mirror in the morning." And I said, "Thank you, Dad. That is exactly what I needed to say, what I needed to hear." And my life changed a lot after that because I knew where to go to for advice. And he gave some really hard advice. So I love that. Back to the list. Put down one of my favorite dogs. Have read hundreds of books. Learned the hard way not to pee on an electric fence. Worked as a roustabout and roughneck in the oil field. Killed, cleaned, and eaten a lot of quail, ducks, doves, coons, squirrels, rabbits, and possums. Graduated from college after only 5 years. Rescued several people from drowning. Been a foster parent. Wrapped a golf club around a tree and quit the game. Had a paper route when I was a kid. Been stuck past the barb with fish hooks many times. Did a skydive with my wife to celebrate my 85th birthday. Have y'all seen that on YouTube? What a scream. Won some fights, lost some fights. Have a YouTube channel. Loved my mother-in-law very much. Survived several surgeries. Have a pacemaker installed. Caught a big tarpon in Florida. Caught many speckled trout, redfish, flounder, and king mackerel in the Gulf of Mexico. Caught a king salmon in Alaska. And yes, one. I was on that trip too. I got one. Yeah. Borrowed a lot of money, paid a lot of money back. Been a featured storyteller in numerous storytelling festivals. Led a storytelling seminar at a prestigious college. Can shoot a rifle or shotgun with pretty good accuracy. Use a casting reel instead of a spinning reel and don't backlash too much. Never been lost in the woods, but I've been turned around. But been lost while flying an airplane on my first 3-legged solo flight. Been petrified with fear when my wife almost died during childbirth. fathered two incredible people. And Ann says, this is my sister Ann, Daddy said that when he held me for the first time when I was born, he loved me so much that there were no words. He taught me to take care of myself even while making sure I was well taken care of. He encouraged me to do whatever I did well and to have a deep sense of humor while doing it. I loved how he loved and respected people and how they loved and respected him back. There's a very large hole he used to fill, and Daddy, there are no words. Back to the list. I watched my father die over a 10-year period in a nursing home. Had a mother with Alzheimer's disease. Killed deer with my car. And only with his car, I should say. Stared with awe at the Sistine Chapel, been to the top of St. Peter's Basilica, seen the Pope up close, been selected for the Mississippi Art Commission's artist roster, bootlegged whiskey from Memphis to Ole Miss while a student there and when liquor was illegal in Mississippi. Was a guest instructor at an IBM sales school at Princeton University, knew a couple of bishops on a first-name basis, camped for 5 days on Chandelier Island during a gale force windstorm, have been to Mexico, Canada, Sicily, Italy, the Bahamas, Germany, and on safari in Kenya, Africa, and and loved my family more than words can express. The last thing on the list was, I stand ready for something new. And there it was. That was because Dad truly was ready to go. 4 days before he died, Mom and Ann and the family were meeting with Dad, and we told him, when the Lord comes and says, "Hey, are you ready to go?" You tell him, "Yes, I'm ready. So we release you. You can go." And he said, "Really? We kind of need to poll the family first." No kidding. And so we did, and we assured him that this was the case. And he said, "That's such a relief." And he died 4 days later. So, that level of responsibility. But the last thing that Dad wanted to have read in his eulogy here is a meditation from the Native American Tecumseh. So Dad said, there's no way to say it better, so just read this. So here we go. So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion, respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life. Perfect your life. Beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home. And so it was with my dad. Thank you all so much for coming. Whoops. You're the preacher. You know how to deal with stuff like this. So I'm going to leave that. All right.
Well, in the New Testament, it speaks of death as sleep, at least when it comes to Christians. In the Bible, it speaks of two ways to die. You can die in your sin, or you can die in faith. Jim Ritchie died in faith. It's not part of the funeral sermon. This is just my comment on his life. But Jim looked forward not only to everything in life, as you heard from his eulogy, he loved life, he enjoyed life. He had an inquiring mind, but he was interested in heaven. He wanted to know about the hereafter. He was excited, anticipatory, looking forward to. He wasn't going to do anything to hasten the crossing over the divide, but he was looking forward to the next phase in the life that God had for all of us. And so, yes, death is not a morose, dreadful thing. It's, well, as the New Testament uses the word sleep when it refers to Christians going into the Lord's presence. Many examples of that. One is over in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, where it talks about death as sleep. It's a wonderful word picture. It's sleep is not something you fear. It's a normal, natural thing. It's a benign term to describe a most natural act. You have a long life, 87 or so years. He had a long life, good health. He worked a lot. He did a lot. After a long, hard day's work, you get tired. You sit down, you lay down, and you go to sleep. Well, that's a wonderful description of life and the end of life. Sleep is not painful. It's an escape from pain. It's not destructive. Sleep is restorative. Sleep is not something you fear. It can be something you look forward to if you've had enough of this day. You know, I'm ready to put it to bed, and you look forward to waking up refreshed and a new tomorrow and a new beginning. Sleep cuts off communication. You can't communicate very well with someone when they're asleep. That has been tried. My wife likes to try and talk to me when I'm asleep or when I'm out of the room, you know, and it doesn't, but it does, sleep does interrupt your communication. But you know that the person will awake, and you'll be able to carry on fellowship and communication with them once again. Sleep is not permanent. It's a temporary, it's a short-term condition. And the Bible assures us that when we awaken, we will awaken in the Lord's presence. And that's where Jim is now. His body is in ashes. It'll be put in the ground somehow or another, but his soul, his spirit, his essence, he himself is with the Lord. In London, in one of the older graveyards, there's a marker underneath a tree that is the epitaph of a man named Pease. That's a good English name, isn't it? But it says on this marker, beneath these clouds and beneath this tree lies the body of a man named Pease. Pease is not here. This is just his pod. Pease shucked out and went home with God. Well, Jim did that. This is what's left of his pod. But he's with the Lord, and Scripture gives us consistently the idea that we're awake, we're more alive than we've ever been in Lord's presence. There's no time of sleep, there's no soul sleep. When he left this life, he went in the Lord's presence, alive and catching up on all those things that he wanted to find out about. Sleep comes to us in various times in life. Sometimes people live a long, full life. Sometimes it comes earlier. But whenever death comes, it comes to transition us into God's presence. Our grieving is proper because Jim was loved and he'll be missed. But as Dr. Jim said, it's not without hope. I spent some time as a police chaplain, and I quickly found out that a lot of people that the police deal with are not Christians. And when death comes to them, it's a tragedy. It's an unmitigated calamity. There is no hope. People who do not know the Lord, have no relationship with God, when death comes, there's no hope. The most frustrating thing I had to deal with as a police chaplain is the only thing you can do is grief counseling. I mean, that's it. Walk them through the stages of grief because there is no hope. But as Christians, we have every confidence. We have God's assurance that this life, the life God gave us, continues. And death is but the transition from this world into an eternal world where that fellowship can continue forever with those we love and with our Lord himself. The next item on the agenda that we had planned was to take a few minutes, and we have a few minutes, to give any of you that would like to share a favorite story or reminiscence of Jim. This is your chance.
I was reminiscing today that exactly 6 months ago, tomorrow, Barry, we were on a sailboat, on a sunset cruise. Yeah, with Ann and Al, with them, yes.
Hello, all. I am Jim's granddaughter, Hannah, Ann's daughter. And I wanted to share as the grandchildren of Jim Ritchie, I'm sure we knew him a lot differently than a lot of you knew him. And there were so many sides to that man, I'm sure you know that. He was a lot of things to a lot of people, very loved. And on December 18th at 12:43 a.m., the day that he passed, about 5 hours later, I felt compelled to just write down as many memories as I could, and I'd love to share them with you. There is no stream, it's a very stream of consciousness, but after that list, I feel like I'm okay. Fishing trips to the lake out back, the haunted restaurant that closed for good between the time we made reservations and arrived for said reservations, games of checkers, explanations of football that never quite stuck, the reading of the Christmas story from the Bible every year in that deep, rich voice, the way he opened a dinner blessing with, "Father, accept our humble, grateful thanks for this food and the hands that prepared it," songs and hymns by the fireplace, at the piano, a story for every occasion, and the way his eyes lit up whenever he laughed. such a big smile stretching across his bristly mustache, with joy in that gravelly laugh, fun day trips to wherever Gammy had chosen for the time. Standing in the pews of the Lone Pine, listening to him take the baritone part in every hymn. Always trying to catch him up on learning the new technologies to reach his audiences or just figure out his computer. Tractor rides and truck rides in the back of the white pickup or the front seat for the special one-on-one time. His famous pecan pie or his special breakfast of granddaddy eggs, tasting fluffy with a hint of garlic powder. Sleeping in his big, worn brown recliner in front of the Ole Miss game. Being called Hannah Puddin', which I will miss every day. And this morning I wrote at 8:38 a.m. Joy and sadness are two sides of the same coin, because if something didn't give us joy to begin with, then we wouldn't be sad to lose it. So today we celebrate the sadness as we let it flow, because it is a reminder of the joy. The aches when thinking back on memories are the signs that the memories filled our hearts. So please embrace the sadness. It is proof that the joy was there. Thank you.
Hey guys, I am Michael. I am Ann's son and grandson to Jim Ritchie. Yeah. This is the best and funniest memory I have of fishing with him one day. I might have been 7 or something. And I got a little too close to the dock edge, fell in, and he picked me up, pulled me out, and said, "What did you do that for?" Pretty much. And next thing I knew, I was like, I'm pretty sure there was a sea turtle and it holding me up. And for years I believed it. That's probably the funniest and the coolest thing that has ever, well, not ever, but that I can recall at the moment.
Hello, I am Beth Young, also daughter to Anne. The memory that I think of the most when I think of Granddaddy was when I was about 6 years old. He brought me to one of his book signings at Barnes & Noble. And I don't quite remember why he brought me, but I was there. And he told me to pick out a book, whichever book I wanted. And I had to read the first chapter while he did his book signing. And then if I liked the book, I could take it home. So I picked out Tarzan of the Apes and read the first chapter, loved it, and he got the book for me. And the reason that's the first story that comes to mind is because I do that every time I go to a bookstore. I get a coffee, and I sit down, and I read the first chapter of that book, and I think about him. You know, it's kind of hard for me in the moment to come up with specific memories of him because he was always there and such a steady presence through it all. But every time I saw him, I loved to tell him whatever accomplishment I had recently achieved. And when I was presented with any kind of raise or any kind of impressive thing that I thought he would be impressed with, my first thought was, I hope, I just was excited to tell him because I knew that he would be proud of me. And it was just a very special feeling when Granddaddy was proud of you. And this was, I live in California, so I had not been here for much of the last year, but I did get to spend time with him this past week. And the last thing that he said to me. I told him, "I love you, Granddaddy," and he said, "I love you, Bessa," and then he looked at me through one eye, and he said, "Heading out." And that brought me a lot of peace. I don't know why, just seeing him move forward with so much courage and so much peace and humor, I'm gonna miss him a lot, and I'm excited to see him again. So.
While Alan is coming.
Oh, no, I'm not singing yet.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, you can, it's all right. I was just, you've heard from some of the grandchildren in Proverbs. It says, grandchildren are the crown of the elderly. And the pride of sons is their fathers.
Yes, I'm the son-in-law, and the father of the two girls, Beth and Hannah, that just spoke, and Michael, yes, but they're in this story. That's why. Yeah, so you know Jim's big, booming voice, and he could be a very intimidating father-in-law to a 25-year-old marrying his only no-words daughter, and. But then we had grandchildren. And one time our two girls were staying at their house. They were like 6 and 8 and were supposed to be in the bed, and we're giggling and messing around and not going to sleep. And he came booming into the room and said, "Girls, if y'all don't cut it out, I'm gonna have to give my belt." And both of them in unison said, "Granddaddy." So, they made son-in-law life so much easier. Hannah is also the one that was sitting in his lap when she was about 3 and looked up at his jowls and said, "Granddaddy, why is your face all crumpled up?" So, anyway, yeah, he was a blessing and a good dad.
My name is Mike Blair. I am Alan's uncle, and I had a little bit to do with that. First off, I want to know, I wasn't 2 lines into that obit, and I said, Jim wrote this. But the good parts, I'm curious about those good parts that didn't make it into the jar. But the good parts of Jim weren't physical. The heart, not the heart, his integrity, his love, his sincerity. I'm one of those ersatz sons that Jimmy referred to, Jim, whatever. But I was Jim's employee for about 10 years. Interesting story there, he always introduced me as the answer to the EEOC, because I graduated from state. I had the last laugh though, right? Hail State, Ann, right? Okay. Got her over there, got her married to mine. No, I didn't do all that, but I did have the last laugh, and Jim was fine with that. I was his partner for 10 years too, and we had great times riding around town, riding around the South in that deer-slaying Blazer that he had. And he told me all the stories that are in the book before he wrote them down, and so I had the front row seat to a lot of his stories. And a lot of who I am now as a person and as a businessman, I owe to him. I have his same style, I guess, of telling stories and jokes and using Southern colloquialisms in the face of Yankees and stuff like this that are endearing to some but offensive to others. But you know what? I don't care. We did what we did. Jim and I did it together, and I'm glad to carry on that tradition. In keeping with that, Jim loved a good time and a good story. So I have one great one for you. And it's not a Jim Ritchie story that you would have heard before, because Jim is the character in the story. It's a true story for the most part. I will apologize in advance for any Miss Americas or families of Miss Americas that might be here, if any of this story is not true. But, you know, like Jim, you can't let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So when we were working, selling software, a new company came to town and came to Jim and I and said, y'all been real successful selling that software. We want you to sell ours. We're just coming to the United States from Sweden, and we want you to come sell our software. So we went to Chicago and we looked at their software and we liked it. And we invited their VP to come down and visit us in Mississippi. Now this VP is a guy named Ron. He was a Jewish gentleman from Chicago. And as was the case always when Yankees came to town, we took them out to eat catfish, fried pickles, and turnip greens, right? So we went to the Cock of the Walk. And Jim and I were sitting there and visiting with Ron and having a good time and visiting and talking business and talking Southern life and introducing him to it, and it was totally foreign to him. And so Jim's kind of quiet here, and so I take the initiative and I say, Ron, see, you may not believe this, looking at Jim with that crumpled up face that he had then. And so you won't believe this, but Jim is the only man I know that dated 2 Miss Americas. Oh, yeah, right. Ron's going, yeah, right. I go, no, really, really true. Jim went to Ole Miss in the late 50s, early 60s. They had back-to-back Miss Americas. And Jim was there with them and friends with them. And in fact, I heard he dated them. Apologies to any family if that's not true. Doesn't matter. Ron's going, oh, yeah, right. I don't believe that. I don't believe. You know, Jim's just, he's got that little grin, you know, he always kind of sitting there. Well, he wasn't going to say it wasn't true because it was a great story. But we went on and visited and went and had our meal. We were kind of finishing up and, you know, wrapping up the dinner and just visiting a little bit. And all of a sudden, there's a commotion at the front of the Cock of the Walk. Oh, you know, everybody's clapping and everything. And we're going, what's going on? What's going on? We look up. And Marianne Mobley walks in the door. She walks in the door and she's doing her thing, you know. And she looks across the room and she goes, Jim! And Jim jumps up and runs over and they hug and they're talking. And this Ron looks at me and he goes, okay, I believe it. Absolutely happened. Absolutely happened. As we left the restaurant, though, Jim pulled me aside and said, no, be ready for the call, because Perry's going to smell all this perfume on me, and you're going to have to tell her what happened. But Jim loved being part of that story, because it wasn't one he told, but it was about him. But it was so meaningful. I mean, that he was just such a great man. I loved him dearly. He was a father to me for my adulthood. He led me in many ways, and he was a friend, a mentor. And I love him, and I'm so happy for him now. And thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Martha?
Well, I'm Martha. I am Jim's daughter-in-law, and I was just jotting down what I love about him. So many things I love about him, but he would always tell the story of Jim coming to talk to him. Fortunately, he asked him about this too, of whether he should marry me or not. And Granddaddy would say, if you let her get away, you're an idiot. Now, you can imagine how that made me feel as his daughter-in-law. I always felt like I belonged and that he wanted me there. And I've heard from a lot of people that he made everybody feel that way. Like, I love you and I love who you are, and he never tried to fix anything about me or anybody else I know of. He just loved me and accepted me and cheered me on, and just always treated me like I was the greatest. And so it's such a blessing to have a father-in-law like that. And as I think many people have said, he was a father to a lot of people. And he did a good job. And he was a father because we got to choose him. Ann and Alan didn't, but Ann and Jim didn't, but we had a choice in whether we let him be that person in our lives, and he was that, and he really stuck with people. He was a risk taker, as you could tell from the list, but he also took risks on people, and he didn't give up on them. He was very loyal, and he always thought the best and hoped the best for all of us, and you could just be yourself with him, and you could also just, when he told me he was going to go skydiving at 85, I said, "You've lost your mind." And he said, "No, we're going to do it," and he did. The one thing he didn't want was to be a burden. I can't tell you how many million times he said that. And towards the end, when he had less independence than he wanted to have, he was very gracious. He walked in that very well. And I said, "You know what? The only burden we're carrying is losing you. Getting to be with you is a gift." That was my father-in-law.
My name is Will Ritchie. I am Uncle Bubba's nephew. I certainly had no intentions of talking here today. A couple things. One of my favorite lines of one of my most recent artists is, to your point, "Don't worry about changing your accent. A Southern man tells better jokes." It's 100% true, and that's one of the best stories I've ever heard. It reminds me of another one. I'll tell it to you later. I'm not up here to tell you a bunch of memories that I have with Uncle Jim. There's kind of a reason for that, but I have a few, and they're quick. One, I remember him telling me when I was playing catcher, that was the tools of ignorance, but he loved it because I think he played catcher too. He taught me how to pitch quarters, so he introduced me to gambling as well, which I still appreciate to this day to some extent, but responsibly, I suppose. Sorry. But as I sit here and I hear these stories and look around the room and meet family members that I don't know, I'm just absolutely blown away by the impact that Uncle Bubba had. And it fills me with both happiness and regret, of course, because the amount of things he could have taught me throughout my life are just countless. But I will sit here looking at this group right here and just absolutely dumbfounded by the impact of his steady leadership, his faith and consistency, and the impact he's made on your lives, and the fact that in the lessons that he's taught you that you're going to be able to carry forward and live your life in a similar way. So this is the trip that I made that I will probably be most grateful that I've ever made in my life. So thank you.
Anyone else? Alan, if you'll come lead us in Victory in Jesus. We wanted to close on a high note. This song is that, and I suspect Jim would sing it heartily if he was able.
Amen. I do want to make one thing, have one clarification. Perry jumped out of that airplane also.